The American dream is dead.
I will bring it back. I will fight for you with every breath, and I will never let you down.
Sadist.
I'm not going to give you a question.
Can you stay categorically?
You are fake news.
Sir,
Misogynist.
how stupid are our leaders?
Racist.
Look at my African American over here.
We choose freedom.
That would be me.
Donald Trump, who is one of the most politically divisive personalities in the United States, if not the world, inherited his initial business empire from his wealthy father, became a reality TV performer and a product shuckster, and along the way he's had a long-standing association with the WWE, dating all the way back to the 1980s when he first actively sought out being famous on top of being rich. The relationship that Trump has with the McMahon family business goes well beyond the ring, and it's quite incredible to see how it's all played out over the years. It's not a bold take to say that his relationship with WWE and professional wrestling has played a big role in how a lot of people know him today. And it's crazy to think that for a period, he was the most powerful man in the world, and his entire appeal would have been directly influenced by the psychology of pro wrestling. So what exactly is Donald Trump's relationship with WWE and the history behind it? This is Sportskeeda Wrestling. I'm Kevin Kellum. Yeah, this is a very weird topic with weird people with some significant names and very consequential things. Don't take this as a political endorsement at all. It's just a very odd history to cover, and we'll cover it here. You think you know all the wrestling stories? There's more you haven't heard yet. Join us on Backstage Pass. It's easy to find out the connections between the McMahons, specifically the powerful Vince McMahon and Linda McMahon, and their ties to Donald Trump. It may be the exact reason why Linda McMahon, a former WWE executive, became the administrator of the Small Business Administration under the Trump presidency, a role she was appointed to. She previously made attempts to become a senator, an elected office. But the relationship dates back to the 1980s, when WWE was making a name outside of the initially isolated world of professional wrestling. Vince McMahon, as you know, had a vastly different vision for what he wanted to do with the company that would become the WWE, as compared to his father, the promoter who he bought the business from, Vince McMahon Sr., going to a nationally televised product, touring at a scale, at a time when pro wrestling was presented in specific regional designations, territories. McMahon sought to give WWE a glamorous Hollywood makeover and basically change the entire idea of how people envision pro wrestling, and he did it effectively, taking the genre of professional wrestling to new heights. While his more traditional way of promoting, Vince McMahon Sr. wanted to keep it in the old ways, the territories, where he wouldn't encroach on other wrestling promoters and their companies. His son had a far greater ambition that wasn't bound by lines on a map. He wanted the WWE to be far more than just a professional wrestling show. He wanted it to be a full-fledged entertainment brand. Once his father passed away, he took an even greater action to make that possible and bring it to the next level. Apart from just the national television and international television broadcast deals, everything started getting bigger and a whole lot grander. And there's nothing in WWE that spells grandeur like WrestleMania. With the third edition of the annual mega show, it became the hottest ticket within pop culture as pro wrestling broke through in the rock and wrestling era with Hulk Hogan, Hulkamania, and the success of Hulk Hogan vs. Andre at WrestleMania III. Around this time, Donald Trump had a failed venture into owning a sports team with the New Jersey Generals of the USFL. He had an association with boxing, hosting numerous events at his Trump Plaza Casino complex in Atlantic City, within the shadow of New York City. These same casinos would years later go bankrupt under his ownership and management, with the New York Times reporting that they were a protracted failure. But in the mid-'80s, it was a different, fresher position for Trump Plaza, and a possible spot for the WWE to do something significant. In those late 1980s, Trump's side connected with McMahon to let Trump Plaza host WrestleMania IV. which was an event where the Macho Man Randy Savage became the WWE Champion and embarked on a year-long reign. It would also see the anticipated rematch of Hogan versus Andre the Giant. This would take the stadium grandeur of WrestleMania III from Pontiac Silverdome and put it in the more exclusive, intimate setting of Trump Plaza. Yes, this was a very different presentation in Atlantic City with Trump Plaza for WrestleMania, which the previous year was one of the biggest stadium events in all of entertainment, in front of 93,000 people allegedly, and then this year in 1988 in front of a reported 18,000 plus. Though the event may have been lukewarmly received by fans, with CageMatch.net collectively rating the show in retrospect a poor 3.7 out of 10, it was profitable, according to WWE producer Bruce Pritchard, who said it was an easy-to-run venue and a handsome deal for WWE. He stated on the Something to Wrestle With podcast, "It's still almost considered the New York market, and people in New York don't think twice about taking a weekend trip to Atlantic City. Trump Plaza was brand new. They offered to pay and pick up all of the hotel expenses. It was a very handsome deal," says Pritchard. It was such a massive hit that even Donald Trump and his business team was taken by surprise. He didn't expect the show to sell out as quickly as it did. He even went on the record to say that he had never seen tickets sell as easily as they did for WrestleMania IV. So for the first and only time in WWE history, a venue would host a WrestleMania for a second consecutive year. This time it was WrestleMania V, with the mega powers exploding, Hulk Hogan versus Macho Man Randy Savage colliding in the main event. To have 3 consecutive WrestleManias of this scale and quality, some debating on the quality, was something else. So it's not hard to see why the relationship between Trump and WWE grew closer. Even though he couldn't host WrestleMania after that, he popped in 2 years later in the crowd as a celebrity attendee, along with the likes of Chuck Norris. 13 years later, Trump would be at ringside for WrestleMania 20 at the world's most famous arena, Madison Square Garden, with Jesse the Body Ventura interviewing Trump. An interesting scenario with Jesse the Body also being a political outsider that Trump would eventually become himself. Trump was asked what WrestleMania means to him. In a rather odd and funny moment in hindsight, Ventura asked if he would get Trump's financial backing if he got into politics. Trump said 100% before Ventura hyped the crowd up about a wrestling figure in the White House. Yes, that actually happened. What Ventura probably didn't predict, even though he himself would have political success as the governor of Minnesota, he wasn't going to be the one to be able to tell you that Donald Trump would eventually become the president of the United States. Even Jerry the King Lawler remarked, wondering whether we'd ever see Trump's name on a ballot. Wow, they treated it like a wrestling angle back then. Around this time, Donald Trump found himself firmly backed into the mainstream because of his show, the reality TV hit on NBC, The Apprentice, which was a competitive format where people would compete to become a part of the Trump company, and you guessed it, his Apprentice. The show was a massive success, garnering 28 million viewers for the season 1 finale alone. It also had a Celebrity Apprentice spinoff that was also successful. Probably knowing when to cash in, Mr. McMahon, Vince McMahon, waited for a few years to get the perfect opportunity to get his good business partner, Donald Trump, into a WWE storyline for the first time in a long time, or at least really for the first time. If you consider all those ringside things, this was a lot more expanded and would have a lot more consequence. To start it off, he booked a match featuring a Trump impersonator against someone cosplaying as Trump's real-life rival, comedian Rosie O'Donnell. Much like Trump in real life, he did not respond to being made fun of too well, appearing in character, I guess, in a Titantron segment on Monday Night Raw, yes, remotely deciding to shower the fans in the arena with money, like real money, because Donald Trump is known for money, and also losing money, but that's a different video. While Trump pitched the idea of facing Vince himself, Mr. McMahon said he could never wrestle again, leading to both billionaires to pick their proxy superstars for a proverbial showdown. For Mr. McMahon, it was the dominant and scary WWE Intercontinental Champion Umaga. And for Trump, he chose the young, strong, powerful Bobby Lashley. The showdown would go down at the biggest show of the year in Motor City, Michigan, Detroit at WrestleMania 23. For context, Lashley was Vince McMahon's newest golden boy behind the scenes, with many wanting to see him pushed to the moon for his larger-than-life appearance and ability to deliver some truly powerful wrestling moves. So putting him on the side of the good guy, at least that's what Trump was in this scenario, was an interesting thing, and really an endorsement from WWE of the future almighty man that Lashley would become. It was quite the spot for Lashley to be in, especially so young into his WWE career. But let's be real. The match was all about McMahon and all about Trump, and it was so ridiculously over the top and gained WWE a lot of mainstream out of the wrestling bubble attention for the biggest show of the year. It became the biggest box office attraction that WrestleMania 23 would provide, and it was a big reason why it became WWE's most purchased pay-per-view in history until WrestleMania 28 some years later, which was headlined by The Rock and John Cena. For context, it drew a whopping 1.25 million buys. That's a lot of people paying to see some weird punching from Trump and McMahon getting his head shaved. Yes, adding to the fact that the pay-per-view featured the unforgettable World Heavyweight title clash of Batista and The Undertaker, a great match, very underrated, an awesome main event between John Cena and Shawn Michaels. The conversation, though, was no doubt all about the Battle of the Billionaires, as it was billed, and that was the biggest draw on the show by far. With WWE fading from mainstream attention, but still maintaining its own island of relevancy, yes, I can use that phrase here, it was an attempt to get an interest from the outside into what WWE was doing, and it worked. It's probably funny for a lot of people looking back in retrospect, depending on which side of the political spectrum you fall on, especially when Trump was portrayed as the babyface, depending on who you vote for. You guys kind of understand what we're saying. Once again, we're not endorsing anyone. Despite being a truly ruthless real estate mogul and reality TV star, Trump cared about what fans, wrestling fans, thought of him and pandered to them, with Mr. McMahon being the bad guy as he always was. Whether you like it or not, it sort of worked. The billionaire whose representative lost at WrestleMania would have to get their head shaved. And that was Mr. McMahon. And it was quite the memorable scene, depending on how you want to view that in history with the way people view them now. Somehow the idea, at least of one billionaire having their head shaved, was entertaining for a lot of people to tune in. However you feel about the storyline nearly 18 years ago, it's one that stands out. There was one segment that stands out in all of this, the contract signing on Raw. McMahon explained that WWE was his world, and nobody could crush him in his world, while Trump was kind of presented as the cooler billionaire. Billionaires are cool? All right. Two beautiful women walked out with Trump on his side, Maria Kanellis and Candice Michelle of WWE fame, and Trump got quite the reaction at the time. McMahon made a comment that Trump may have had the support of the WWE fans, but 95% of them were idiots, cheap heat from a very rich man. We have no reason to doubt that he probably felt that way for real, maybe, who knows? To say it was goofy would be obviously an understatement. It had some elements of truth, but whatever. A pretty entertaining part of the entire thing was Stone Cold Steve Austin coming out and looking at the future president of the United States and ruthless billionaire Donald Trump and telling him he didn't give a damn how much money he was worth. He told Trump to not piss him off in the ring and warned him that an $8 billion can of whoop-ass could be served. Yeah, $8 billion of whoop-ass. Even though Trump was the good guy, it's pretty evident looking back on it that he was always more naturally suited at being a heel, a villain, which is a role he would play in the eyes of some in reality. When you're a multi-billion-dollar mogul, it's not exactly your forte to be the good guy to the masses. Like me, people. Like me. It just so happened that for this particular storyline, that was seemingly how they were going to pit him against McMahon. They were certainly getting reactions along the way. Still, when he made his entrance, it always screamed of somebody who demanded their presence be acknowledged and who clearly wanted to be a big deal wherever he went. Kind of like a lot of heels in pro wrestling. Look at me, look at me. This is also the same Donald Trump who posed as his own publicist to get in newspapers back in the day. That's, once again, a different video. When WrestleMania came, Donald Trump lived up to his part and got physical by tackling Vince McMahon at WrestleMania 23 and hitting him with Shane McMahon-like punches. I don't know if that's an endorsement of his punches. Speaking of Shane McMahon, he was placed in a quick replacement referee for Stone Cold Steve Austin during the match, but he got taken out. Shenanigans ensued. The entire finishing sequence between Shane McMahon getting his ass kicked, Vince McMahon getting his ass kicked, and then Donald Trump also got his ass kicked for those people that didn't like him being there. And then Vince McMahon got his head shaved, Bobby Lashley hitting a spear for the win. It was so insane, even the timekeeper couldn't contain his excitement and rang the bell a little bit before Austin's hand hit the mat for the third count of the pinfall. Jim Johnston's bald-headed blues played when Trump, Austin, and Lashley shaved McMahon's head. It was one of those moments that was special for all of these odd, surreal reasons. Trump would go on to return to WWE for a very short and unresolved storyline where it was revealed he would be the man who purchased Monday Night Raw from WWE. As a gift to fans, he would air a commercial-free episode of Raw, much to the chagrin of Mr. McMahon, who went on to buy Raw back for double the price. It was a bit of a waste in promising of some type of storyline that really seemingly was just resolved because Trump may or may not have been committed to it. But Trump had moved on, so there was no way the story could unfold without him being there in some meaningful way. Yeah, it was bad. This was also leading into the weird celebrity guest host era of Monday Night Raw, which was a flop in retrospect in the eyes of many. Also that moment where Trump slapped Vince in what was one of the worst hold me kind of brawls, but anything for a rating, I guess. A few years later, Donald Trump got into the celebrity wing of the WWE Hall of Fame. Yeah, all of the fun with Donald Trump being associated with WWE from the WrestleMania highs were now leading to some just weekly TV appearances here and there lows. And this is where the pro wrestling psychology really influences the future of Donald Trump. Yes, his ability to apply things that are used in pro wrestling have influenced his political and celebrity persona moving onward from it. A shout out to Marissa McCool of the International Insights, who covered this aspect of Donald Trump in a brilliant article. Although he's popular among a portion of the United States of America, it's hard to deny how despised he is by the other half. And that's kind of his appeal. He's a heel. Some people like the bad guy, and he embraces it. And if he wasn't hated, the people that like him possibly would not like him nearly as much. Kind of reminds you of a modern-day wrestling heel. There's a lot of people that liked Roman Reigns when he was still the villain, right? I know that seems like we're simplifying it, but you can kind of see what we're saying here. His number one drawing point for some is how much he aggravates people who aren't like his supporters. It's probably because they have the chance to show a more authentic side of their personality and don't act according to what people think they should be saying or whatever. It's, a faux sense of rebellion. The brutal honesty of that resonates with a lot of people while also angering the other half of the population. You see what we're saying here? They say that what's on their mind and they make noise, whether people love it or hate it. It's certainly about getting a reaction, like pro wrestling. The fact that these words or actions can elicit a reaction is a validation, whether that is a positive or negative reaction. In a weird way, it's kind of like what wrestling is. If everyone's quiet, it's not working. But if you think about his tweets and social media things that have gone viral, his ability to verbally combat his opponents, and the specific wordplay he has used as a personality, it gets a big reaction. It's also led to controversy, but that's something he isn't used to. Yeah, the more heat that comes from one part of the audience, the greater it leads to the support from the other, and the fire rages on. A lot of his personality that we've come to see in the last 8 or 9 years of his political career is a direct reflection of pro wrestling. He knows how to appeal to some of the core aspects of human emotions, which is one of the big goals of wrestling. Considering how much of the spotlight he's been under, it's really hard to tell where the blurring of lines between how much of what we see is an act and how much of it is truly him. But isn't that political theater in general? And if that's the essence of wrestling, isn't that what political theater is in general? The connection between Donald Trump and Vince McMahon is well documented behind the curtain instead of in front of the cameras where they played on-screen rivals. Vince was one of Trump's largest donors during his 2016 presidential campaign. Former Trump advisor Sam Nunberg went on the record to say that only 2 people in the world were the people Trump would take phone calls from privately. And one of them was Vince McMahon, the other being ex-chairman of MGM Worldwide TV, Mark Burnett, the same one that launched The Apprentice. Like we mentioned earlier, Linda McMahon was in Trump's cabinet for quite a while during his first term as president. Just how Vince McMahon understood decades before that people paying to see people wrestle each other was only one aspect of his business, the entertainment aspect was a larger part of it. Donald Trump applied that same principle to politics. Heck, even if you're unaware, watch the clip of Trump's White House press secretary Sean Spicer and his over-the-top antics at the beginning of Trump's presidency. It felt like something straight out of a Saturday Night Live sketch, or it was turned into a Saturday Night Live sketch mocking him. Pretty funny stuff. Abraham Josie Reisman, the author of Vince McMahon and the Unmaking of America, told Politico in an interview that Trump looks up to McMahon and considers him one of his only true friends. She also described it as a NeoKayfabe ring, similar to the tone of what we said earlier about blurring the lines between fiction and reality. For those of you who don't know the term kayfabe, it is the old wrestling carny jargon for maintaining the fictional aspects of wrestling as a real thing, and how much of Donald Trump is real when you see it on TV. That is very debatable. The idea of NeoKayfabe is that the audience is watching and knows what they're witnessing is fiction, and the people running the show then adding elements of behind-the-scenes truth, quote-unquote, to elicit responses. They're simply creating scenarios and portraying them as real. I believe this would be described as misinformation, but within wrestling lines, we would call this a storyline. This can be when a personal real-life issue off-screen is suddenly used to spice up a storyline and add an element of reality to an otherwise fictional storyline. Yeah, wrestling blurs the lines sometimes themselves. This can be correlated with Trump's 2015 campaign, where he somehow positioned a more anti-establishment figure for himself who didn't want to stick to the script that other politicians would. That would be a non-diplomatic language or tone, and he didn't hesitate to say things that other politicians couldn't even imagine saying in front of a camera, things that would be seen as embarrassing, but him labeling himself as an outsider made it seem cool. It got him a lot of followers online, but also a lot of detractors, and it got a lot of reaction, and once again, reaction is objective. Under the wrestling psychology, if you're getting them talking, then you're getting them to help you. Reisman also mentioned one of the crucial aspects of Trump's political rise is his success that he has come from, once again, being hated. She somehow compared it to McMahon, who would himself make himself so despicable that it led to the rise of Austin 316, people buying Austin 316 shirts, an attempt to seemingly stick it to the man who was McMahon. Yes, he's the guy who sold you those shirts as well. But the man who ultimately profited from all that is the guy who you're supposed to stick it to? Yeah, similarly, people might tweet angrily at Trump and express their disdain on social media, but some see that as something that only benefits him. You see the cycle that we're presenting here? It keeps repeating. And the reality is that it isn't a concept exclusive to Trump. It's really something that has been applied to the entire political landscape, especially with the hyper reactions that we see on social media. You might hate him, you might love him, but you probably feel something when you see him. And the reason you do, or a part of it, comes from the influence of professional wrestling in some way or another. Even Donald Trump, who probably just started watching WWE before the big boom back in the day, would have had no idea it would have influenced his life and his career in some ways. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is really what is having us scratch the surface of the insane influence of professional wrestling on politics and Donald Trump as a whole. We also know at this point in the video we haven't mentioned the serious criminal issues that both McMahon and Donald Trump had faced in courtroom battles. We could get into them maybe in a different video, but that all applies here as well. Wrestling is supposed to be something that helps you suspend disbelief and escape the reality of the real world, but it's its own way becoming something that is shown time and time again to be an industry that is a reflection of society.